as a venture, as a startup, as an idea even. If you're putting together now your execution plan, being familiar with the lean startup methodology is really, I would say, one of the best decisions you're going to do. So I think we have quite a good opportunity today to discuss and to share it. Also, as Adam suggested, this can be an open discussion. So perhaps after Adam will introduce the lean startup methodology and will share with us his thoughts on this, this will be open, the stage will be open for your questions. So by all means, I can see here Dimitar and Duba, Eti, Ilya, Luigi, and somebody from Pensense, if you can write your name, Pensense, Ricardo. Please feel free to ask Adam any question. Hopefully, it's okay with you, Adam, to share to ask you questions about things that comes up and are relevant to their businesses and their ventures and where they are. So please use this opportunity to discuss it. I also have some questions, so I will, if there will be time, I will share it with you, Adam, as well. So without any further ado, Adam, please, the stage is yours.
Perfect. All right, so you can hear me okay, and you can see me sort of
yes.
I moved from the phone to desktop, so, but of course, Murphy's Law, the wire doesn't reach, so I can't put it on the monitor, so we have the phone here, sound here, but
all right.
you know,
we can hear you and see you.
It's a pretty amazing thing to be able to, you know, sometimes travel around the world and teach, and also to do something like this with technology and hold a meeting. You know, that was the future 5 years ago, and now it's real, right?
Absolutely.
So, all right. So yeah. So I'm more of an entrepreneur than a teacher. As you said, I started my first company, which was one of the original sharing economy companies. So when we do this live, I can sort of say, who's heard of the sharing economy, and hands can go up. I don't think we can really do that here, so we won't dwell on the limitations. But it was basically, if you were on the call 5 minutes ago when I pointed out the window, it was the same neighborhood. My thesis was that people were wasting stuff, you know, books, movies, cameras, vacuum cleaners, personal items that go unused. The thesis is pretty simple. And I was just going to build a platform, connect people, everyone was going to borrow, you know, waste was going to go down, the environment was going to be awesome, people were going to save money. And unfortunately, you know, it doesn't work that way with startups. And I never thought I'd be teaching a methodology, but I went through a lot of the things that I see the people that I'm teaching now, you know, arguments with the founders. What do we focus on? If we focus too small, you know, our market isn't big enough. If we're too large and too broad, you know, we can't really make a dent. We don't know what's going on. You know, assuming that you know, like Amir said, assuming that you have to raise money in order to have a product and then to get it in front of customers. Just a lot of fallacies that you know, entrepreneurs seem to make over and over again. It's like on a multiple choice quiz, you know, the chances of getting everything wrong is almost impossible, right? Even if you don't know any of the answers, you get a 50% on the test, even if you guess. But with entrepreneurs, especially first-time entrepreneurs, for some reason, it's like taking the test and getting everything wrong. It's mathematically impossible. So Lean Startup, I actually resisted it at first. My co-founder introduced it to me, and we'll talk about what exactly Lean Startup is in a second. But we were struggling. You know, we didn't know who our customers were. We got a lot of press. We had a lot of users signing up, telling us how great we were, telling us what a great idea it was, but nobody was using it the way we wanted them to, and certainly it wasn't making money. So that's a little bit about me. If you have any, Amir, you have any questions, you want me to fill in any blanks? Sometimes I'm still the entrepreneur, not the public speaker.
Sure. So you're doing fine. So let's move on to understanding a little bit about the Lean methodology.
All right, so now that I'm on the desktop, I do have something I might be able to share. Let's see if this works. All right, you can see this?
Yeah, we can see the 3 steps.
All right, so I hope this image isn't offensive to anyone. Can I see my note? Can I see my notes at the same time? So basically, Lean Startup is about running experiments in order to eliminate waste. Okay, so the old model was, like you said, going out, raising a bunch of money, building a prototype, investing in a sales team, real estate even, building a product, and then trying to get customers, and then trying to understand why. And what Lean is basically saying, let's run experiments, let's apply the scientific method to our ideas, to all these variables. If you've seen a business model canvas, there's about 9 variables. We like to start with just who is the customer, what problem are you solving for them, and ultimately what is the solution, and then how do you capture value. So you basically have a lot of different variables that can go into each one of those boxes, so to speak. And all Lean is applying science to entrepreneurship. Does that make sense so far?
Yes, by all means.
All right.
So
can you read the slide, or is it low quality?
It's a bit, this one is better. You can read it. The scientists do not cuddle ideas.
So they crash test them. They run them into a brick wall at 60 miles per hour. If the idea is sound, the pieces will be that of the wall, not of the car. And that's sort of what Amir and I were talking earlier. As much as I feel very bad, I don't like to pick on entrepreneurs. I'm one myself. I've been picked on with my own ideas. But entrepreneurs are usually usually unwilling to sort of, take a hard line, draw a line in the sand and say, this is what I believe, this is the way I'm going to test it, and this is the outcome I expect. Even if I'm wrong, you should be learning something from these experiments. A lot of times, even now, I'll push entrepreneurs. I'll say, okay, what are you testing? And they'll finally come around to a specific customer segment. Then they'll finally, they won't say what the problem is. Oh, it's for everyone. It solves every problem for every person. Okay, when are you going to test it? When can I hold you accountable again? And the answer, then that's usually where I don't get an answer. So if I can be helpful, after this little talk, what I can be most helpful in is helping you, isolate your actual variables and assumptions. There's a lot of times when, your startup is theoretical, or it's something that's like cool, or, this should exist, right? But you really need to run experiments to isolate the individual assumptions about the individual customers, about why they really need your product, when they're going to use it, how often they're going to use it, and run tests. I mean, a lot of Lean is just obvious, basic stuff, and I could say the same things over and over again, but you're running a test on those specific things. There's no way to test everything at once, so you want to sort of hold other variables constant. So a lot of times people say, well, I can't test that. I don't have enough traffic. So I'll do something that will help them increase traffic just for that week so that they can get a specific answer. Or I don't have the solution. The solution is actually sometimes a variable that you hold constant. And the way you do that, which can be controversial, is pretending that you have the solution and seeing if people buy it. Sometimes you just have to guess. You don't know in the beginning what your riskiest thing is. You have to start testing things little by little.
Would it be, Adam, sorry can you hear me?
Yeah.
Would it be, I think, choosing the riskiest, or finding the riskiest factor that you're going to test, I think, is key.
Yep.
Can you elaborate on how you identify perhaps the most the fact, or the factor that is most riskier within your venture, or would would it be wise to get 2 or 3 mentors to get them around it?
I was actually going to make a joke. I was going to make a joke of that answer, but that's just it. I mean, there are so many other things that are so difficult, and a lot of times I see mentors just giving advice on their own personal, their expertise, or this is what I would do. I try not to judge ideas anymore. I don't even like to judge the entrepreneurs. But as far as the riskiest assumption, that is actually something, where like a VC gets pattern recognition. I think the best thing a mentor can do is pattern recognition for the riskiest assumption and what you should be testing first. That is just a skill. There's no easy answer for that. The exercise when you start breaking down all the variables, and I force people to write them down and say exactly what you think, like nothing, it gets annoying sometimes, but I make people break down like, well, what does waste mean? Well, what does this thing mean? How do you explain this? When the pieces are broken down and you put them into semantic sentences that make sense. So I believe this person has this problem because that's where the hypothesis, that's where the science comes into it. Once you have all the
Adam, can you perhaps give an example of some kind of test with regards to the risk aspect that yield in some kind of meaningful outcome?
Sure. So there's 2 kinds of tests. I have this customer development slide up here. So customer development, people kind of look at it. Is that an MVP, a minimum viable product? Is it a test? Is it an experiment? Is it just an exploration? So we'll gloss over customer development and come back to it. But a lot of times the riskiest assumption is, will people pay? So instead of a coming soon page, on LaunchRock or give me your information, where entrepreneurs are unwilling or a little bit scared to just charge money for a product right away because they believe that it will lower their conversion rate, which it will. You want to test up front, will they pay? In Eric Ries's book, there's a lot of times where he was dealing with an IM chat client. Can you still hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay. So he was dealing with a chat client avatar situation called IMView. And his assumption was that teenagers, would download it and that they needed 6 platforms integrated. But his real riskiest assumption was that anyone even cared about avatars in the first place. So the metric he wanted to prove is that people would install it at all. So can I prove people will install this chat avatar? That's the riskiest assumption. For Facebook, a classic example, the riskiest assumption is not that they could monetize it. The riskiest assumption is that they'll place a photo on their profile, or that they're willing to share some public information, or that they're willing to log in, a second time, or ultimately spend 10 hours on the site. It becomes obvious sometimes what the true riskiest assumption is once you get used to it. But, in Facebook's case, it's the opposite of will they pay for it, because that, once you have 1 billion people on a site, or even not 1 billion, once you have 80% at a local maximum, once you have 80% of people at Harvard, it's reasonable to assume that you could actually monetize this. Even then, even when it was really small, all these insights become relative. So it's not about having 1 billion people. It's about how fast they were able to grow, how much they were able to penetrate the market size, based on other things that they've done where they were only 20% penetrated, and now all of a sudden there's 50%, within 2 days. Groupon is a great example, not of a great test. Well, it's also a good test of an example, but Groupon was The Point, which was a social activist site that tried to get people together, to clean up a park or to paint a neighborhood. So the lesson here is on the value of relative information. So for 2 or 3 years, nobody did anything. And then they pivoted to, pizza coupons. And even though they only sold 2 or 3 the first time, they all sold out. And everyone in the building, participated in the Groupon or 50% or 80% or whatever the number was. It was relative. It wasn't just an absolute value of like, oh, we need 1 billion people, or, people always ask me, what's the minimum? It depends. It's a hard answer for me because they're always looking lean. Lean is not magic, but if you apply science and you still keep your vision and you start running these experiments little by little and you take advantage of your mentors and you hold yourself accountable and you do understand all the variables and you start running these experiments, you get better and better, not just at being an entrepreneur, but you start turning these unknown variables into known. And even if you test the wrong thing at first, another key insight from Lean is that you're iterating constantly, not blindly, not arbitrarily, but you're iterating based on the things that you're learning each week and each month, and you're building them into your next experiments. So even if you pick, this is what's beautiful about Lean, is that even if you pick the wrong thing first, that's not the riskiest, if you prove that true, you're just going to lead yourself to the next riskiest thing, and then then it might break down second. So you still didn't lose everything. You still got there quicker than most people would if they were just building the entire product. It just took you 3 steps instead of 1. So being, I guess, an ultimate Lean Zen master is getting it right the first time. But that's usually unlikely. And I've gotten very big into, let's be aggressive with the theory, but let's just start applying it. So yeah, even if it takes you 3 moves to get to the, and I guess that's the long answer to this question. Even if it takes you 3 moves to get to the riskiest thing, the fact that you're even trying to identify the riskiest thing and running experiments around it in the first place is better than the build it and they will come that people
may I ask you, Adam, you're saying about going out there and all the time getting testing, getting feedbacks. The first question that comes up speaking about this is, what about confidentiality in this stage? Still, specifically in Europe, ventures are very cautious about their IP, their idea. Can you any comment on this?
Yeah, so I'm glad, this is unscripted, and I don't even know what you want my answer to be on this one, but I'm a very big believer. The whole point of a startup, I get a lot of entrepreneurs coming. I just did a panel in San Francisco, and someone asked the same question in the audience, and this wasn't just in Europe. It was in San Francisco, where people are supposedly, most open to this and most willing to take risks. And the answer is, half of the entrepreneurs are all they want to do is protect their idea, and the other half is all they want to do is raise $1 million so they can go get marketing and get in front of as many people as possible. Ultimately, your idea, I personally believe that ideas are relatively worthless. It's about the execution. It's about finding that secret thing. And then once you find that secret thing, sure, keep that close. It's like a poker game where you spot the person's tell. There's certainly elements of keeping your idea, keeping your learnings confidential, but not your idea. You have to get customers. You have to, interact with mentors. You have to interact with investors. I mean, it's in the United States, obviously, in a respectful way, but investors will laugh at you if you ask them to sign an NDA. It's not that that they don't respect your idea, but it's just not feasible. It just doesn't make any sense. If that's what you choose to do, you're allowed. You're entitled, but you just can't really participate in the other upsides of sharing your idea, which is getting feedback, getting early customers, being able to test things, being able to get feedback, being able to get mentors. So it's a trade-off, like anything else. I personally, I could go on and on about ideas, and the ideas themselves to me are not private. The whole point is to make them as public as possible. So that's an easy answer for me. But sure, if you discover some insightful learnings, I wouldn't share those with your competitors. But other than like biotech or something where it's like really a solution heavy and everyone's trying, no one's just been able to figure it out, and you have some secret on how to solve the problem, and for a fact, and this really only applies to super high-tech technology, but even then there's not necessarily a market for it. So it usually only applies to biotech and, really honestly curing diseases. Maybe some satellite stuff and space stuff, or if for a fact the government is offering $1 billion for X and you have the specific formula that solves the problem, then sure, keep that keep that quiet. But as far as your idea, and especially, you know, with all the, I've been in the consumer side myself, with things that are just, you know, consumer facing, and it's usually not the idea that's the unique value proposition.
So perhaps you would agree that the focus these days is on execution and less on the idea.
Yeah, and even that is nuanced. So executing on the wrong solution isn't necessarily a good thing. So to me, lean is about executing on the right thing, and the execution to me is the learning. It's the experiments. It's taking small bets instead of big bets. It's understanding. It's empathy. It's understanding why, and not just, you know, it's not just if people will use it, but why they're using it. Why are they coming back? How everyone just wants something to go viral. Why are they really going to tell their friends? Understanding, asking the tough questions. Yeah, execute. You know, lean to me is the one thing I'd start off with is it's science, but lean is also about demand over supply. If you can take one thing away, and I've been saying that a lot recently, if you can understand the demand side, supply side is usually always possible. So this is why this slide is up. I've been kind of scrolling through to see, you know, this is probably a 5-hour-long presentation when beginning to end, so forgive me if I skip through some of the slides. But yeah, I mean, who is your customer? Why do they have the problem and know they have it? Are they aware of it? Do they need you? Why do they need you? Do experiments to understand that. Not just if they'll click on a button or fill out a form coming soon or tell you that's a great idea. Some entrepreneurs, that's enough. But really, if you really want to, you know, be the superstar entrepreneur, you have to understand who your customer is, what their problem is, why they really need you. Not just you know, getting written up in a magazine and being able to activate, you know, 1,000 or even 10,000 or even 1 million users. 1 million users that are inactive these days, you know, it feels good for that first year, but it's actually not that sustainable unless you know why. And lean is about running experiments to understand why.
Yeah. You mentioned a lot running experiments, and you know, if I'm one of the ventures sitting on the other side of this, or the entrepreneur sitting on the other side of this webinar, they probably ask themselves, look, we are entrepreneurs. We set up this startup, or we researchers which are now formulating this into a business. We are not experts in experiments. Do we need to take an external company to do this? How are we, is there a methodology to do those experiments? This is, like a specific profession, you can say, or this is demands some kind of skills and methodologies. What would you say to them?
I'd say that on the one hand, you're right. It's hard, but entrepreneurship in general is hard, and a lot of people, the cliche about having to wear a lot of hats. Some people, coding's not easy, and a lot of people have, I'd almost, and I don't want to get into a controversial thing that code isn't important, but I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs who spend 2 years teaching themselves how to code. There are some things that you have to learn new skill sets as an entrepreneur, and I think learning how to set up.
Say again.
I think that you do have to learn. I'm saying that you do have to learn new skill sets as an entrepreneur, and I don't want to be controversial to say that code is not important, but you do have to learn new skill sets as an entrepreneur, and I would like to see learning basic science and hypothesis testing, maybe not superior to learning how to code, but yeah, spend a month, researching the scientific method and understanding how to write, how to run an experiment, and go to events where people teach you how to set up an experiment rather than just teaching you how to pitch. And then on the other hand, the answer is
validate your
sorry.
And just and learn how to validate your product and your customers and so forth.
Yeah, and the other answer, which is a little bit less controversial, is that it's not that hard. I mean, entrepreneurs, I think, are the greatest people in the world, and probably the smartest people in the world, and most driven. It's not that hard to figure out. I believe this will happen because is basically what a hypothesis looks like, and setting up giving yourself boundaries, so it has to happen within a specific time. Otherwise, you can never fail. So if you just Google, even I did it myself when I was trying to learn how to teach it better. I Googled what is a falsifiable hypothesis, and you learn it, you look it up on Wikipedia, and it's fine. And you just, entrepreneurs are curious, they solve problems for themselves, but yeah, it's not that hard. And the more you start doing it, and there's a lot more resources in the world. Like you said, this stuff didn't even exist 5 years ago.
Okay, Adam, can I stop you for a second? I just would like to address the audience and the ventures, and just to invite them to ask questions. You have a chat window on the right. If you already have questions for Adam about your specific challenges, about testing, questions you want to ask Adam about lean startup, or anything to do with the validating your ideas, testing your hypotheses, as Adam mentioned, anything at all to do with the early stage validation side, please feel free to ask the questions. Okay. Yes, sorry to interrupt, Adam.
No, it's great. I need a moderator myself sometimes.
Okay.
All right, so what's it?
Yeah, there is a first question, if it's okay with you now, Adam, or you want to continue a little bit longer and then we'll leave some time for questions.
So I can give you a lot of examples of experiments and invalidation.
Oh, you can see, yeah.
So a very clear, simple one that I use all the time is people have a thesis with a point of sale app. They go into a coffee shop. I'm going to get customers through your line quicker, 40% quicker. Your margins will go up by X%. They go into the coffee shop. They talk to the coffee shop owner, and they learn that the coffee shop owner likes their line. It's a source of pride to have people waiting in line. It's a source of, having demand. They're not interested in installing technology or paying you. They're just not interested. And even though the entrepreneur says, well, but your margins will go up and your profits will go up, hearing that's an example of sort of a customer validation experiment. There's similar ones, parking apps I've seen, and this is in Europe. I just dealt with this in Belgrade last week, and in Istanbul I had the same thing. A lot of times there's an app, an assumption. We believe that, people will, if they get a free parking spot on the street, that they will, let someone know when they're leaving, and, they get a couple bucks, and then the person, the person that wants the spot pays a couple bucks but pays less, and so there's a lot of assumptions there. So we force them to break down first, and this answers also the riskiest assumption question. So to me, it's a riskier assumption that the person having the spot will go through the trouble of posting posting the information at exactly the right time, because remember, this requires timing as well. Otherwise, someone else will get the parking spot. So in theory, cheap parking, or free spots, or a platform for parking, that all makes sense on paper. But when you boil down all of the elements required and isolate them independently, so not only just the supply side and the demand side, even the supply side, now you're breaking the variables down into will they say that they'll provide the information, and will they actually provide the information? So we ran an experiment putting flyers on cars in Istanbul. Tell us 10 minutes before, text this number, 10 minutes before you're about to leave your spot, and we'll give you 10 Turkish lira, or whatever. I think that's not that much money, but 1,000 Turkish lira, something reasonable. What that does, first of all, proves demand. It proves almost every part of the business model, and it's not, and you don't need a product to do it. And it's not something that the entrepreneurs are very good, and myself included, I used to do this all the time, are very good at providing excuses. Oh, it didn't work because we don't have the product, or we don't have funding, or we didn't have this. But if you offer, you can physically look at 20 or 30 or 40 people holding the flyer, looking at it, you know that they saw it, so you can't, nowadays things have gotten better with web tracking, but in this case, you know they saw it, you know they read it, you can go up to them afterwards and ask them why they didn't do it. But there's a lot of experiments like that within validation. For validation, I guess it's, some of the famous case studies. Groupon is a validation case study. It was literally, the MVP was a flyer, half-price pizzas if 30 people signed up, and 30 people signed up. Facebook is a validation experiment. It was solution-based, yes, but he built it in one day, and X amount of people signed up instantly. There's another good one. Aardvark, and some of these are in the book, and I'll get good. If you hold me accountable, I'll get good at sending these around. But Aardvark was a question and answer site, sort of like what Quora is now, but after Yahoo Answers. And their thesis was that people will ask experts in their Google chat networks as an IM friend. Does this make sense? So on Google Chat, that they'll ask a question, and then the algorithm would search your network and answer the question for you. So the first assumption is that people would even install the chat window in the first place. If they don't install the chat window, it doesn't matter how good the algorithm is. Does that make, that's a really important lesson, because everyone's always focused on making the algorithm or the platform or assuming scale. But if the first thing doesn't happen, nothing else matters anyway. So Aardvark, and I don't always root against, give examples of failure, even though, just unfortunately by the numbers, that's what we need to focus on. But in this case, they did download it. They added Aardvark as a friend, and on the other side, and then the beauty of that experiment was actually twofold, because once they validated that people would download the client and add Aardvark as a friend, they were also actually able to run the second experiment, which is delivering value, also without the algorithm, and they were just answering the questions themselves, which the same as the parking experiment. It puts you inside the experiment and helps you learn, right? So it puts you inside the experiment. You're dealing with customers exactly. You understand what they're asking, what time, all before you're building the product, which is immensely valuable. I've seen so many times, and I've done it myself, where you're just handing a spec list to someone. You don't really know why. Now you know why, because it's based on interactions with customers. It's based on real use cases. It's based on demand. You understand why. You're not just building things to test them then. You're testing them and then building them. It's a simple reversal, but this is why Amir and I get so excited about Lean, because it's cheating without cheating. It's having the answers. It's not guessing. Some of it's still guessing. But you just, these little tiny experiments, and again, it comes back to like, how do I test the riskiest thing, and how do I understand? The more and more you do it, and I work with this woman, Diana Kander, in Kansas City a lot, and she says you'll fall more in love, with the experiments themselves than with like entrepreneurs love to build stuff. They love their logo. They love picking out a cool domain name and stuff. You will become. Some of the customer development stuff, I admit, is homework stuff. I think that's what one of these slides is over here. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see now the isolate your variables.
So here's the slide. So customer development is sort of like doing your homework, right? And it's like eating vegetables. I'm not going to say that it's fun, but the experiments themselves. And when you start thinking of creative ways, so I think I sent you in my notes before. I'm working with an entrepreneur who's working on a food startup for slow cookers. So I'm going to send her into the supermarket, into the slow cooker aisle, and have her talk to customers. Thinking of creative hacks from the customer side, but then also on the solution side, thinking of ways that you can test the variables without building the product. These things become addicting. They become really fun. They quench that entrepreneurial spirit where other things don't. Because if if we ignored the fact that entrepreneurs are curious and want to build stuff, then this whole thing would fail and nobody would use it. It would become a victim of the very thing we're trying to teach, which is people should use lean, but they don't, and therefore it's not a problem and it doesn't solve anything. But because the experiments actually are fun to learn and to execute, because they do help you, they don't require $100,000 in funding. They don't require you to spend 2 months building something. They do have that instant gratification of being able to test something in a week, or sometimes even a day, or sometimes even an hour. It does work, and that's again why we get excited about it. This is just a fun slide. I don't know if you watch Family Guy, but understand their pain. That's why I like that slide. Did that answer your question? Who was it? Was it Ricardo?
Ricardo, thank you for this. Any other questions? Luigi, Dimitar, any other questions which relate to your stage where you are in terms of validating your business, in terms of testing your assumptions to do with your clients, to do with the market, to do with the product? While we are here, Adam, can you refer to validating in terms of also, I know that you're quite suspicious, if I may say so, in terms of early stage ventures running to investors, if I got you right. But what would you say about speaking to investors in the early stage of the venture, like communicating with investors, asking them some, from feedback in an early stage, not really asking for investment, but more like, what would you look to us to have, or in what circumstances would this venture be investable, if you see what I mean?
Yeah. So this is a tough question for me because I never really raised a huge round, and I do understand the allure of having, a couple $1 million in the bank, and I don't want to be the one who tells someone, if someone's willing, there's still a lot, the world is very big and it's changing and it's interesting, and I don't want to use the word dumb money versus smart money. It is still possible to raise $2 million on an idea. I personally don't think that entrepreneurs should. Not only is it not a great idea, I think sometimes having the money itself can hurt you, not help you. But as far as what to look for, if you're starting to get a little bit more disciplined, I think, and this was a lesson I had to learn, is that investors want to invest in something. They want to help you scale something that's already working, which almost sounds unfair, but it's true. It's your job to sort of figure out the secrets, and then it's their job just to pump money in to make it get bigger. So lean, that's all it is. It's about science. It's about evidence. It's about collecting evidence. It's not about, I think people will do this. It's coming to them, and if you want to call it traction, if you want to call it product market fit, but if you come to them and say people, that's basically what this slide was. It's the difference between what people say and what they do. If you have a thesis about, I think this is a great idea, versus I went out and tested this and 20% of people did this and 14 people did this, and we understand why. Not only do you have the traction itself, but you're also showing the investor that you're the type of entrepreneur that's willing to run experiments, that understands why it's important, that's willing to change certain parts of your strategy without just purely sacrificing your vision. So it's both. It's about the evidence that you collect, but it's also about showing them what kind of entrepreneur you are. And I think both are equally important.
Okay. We have a question from Luigi. Can you see the question?
Yeah, I saw the first one about space. It's funny, I was just dealing with this. Space is hard. I'm not an, I have dealt with a lot of companies in Europe, and I do understand that at some point just the market itself is small, and there's, and I've heard people solve that problem with, doing regional startups, or, I don't really know. I don't know. It's a tough question. It depends on really what your goal is, and if you want to get bought out by an American company or merge, or if you truly want to be the next, biggest company in the world with 1 billion users. Obviously, if you need 1 billion users, you need it to be something that's worldwide, not just not just regional. But I don't think that's really the question anyway. As far as the initial stuff, you should be able to be close to your customers. Can this be done now? Through Skype and obviously GoToMeeting. When I actually teach workshops and we tell people especially in the beginning, you want to see their pupils dilate. You want to be able to have face-to-face meetings. You want to talk to people and not do surveys. But on the other hand, if it's just physically impossible, the fact that you're experimenting at all and startups are hard. There's a million different variables. So if you can be close to your market, yes, it's always preferable over not being there. But yeah, the world is changing. If you can use technology, yeah. We did something. Someone was running an experiment around a massive multiplayer game, and they did all their customer development inside the game itself. And so you can do creative stuff like that. But yeah, the closer, especially in the beginning, right? At some point, as you learn more and more, you can start automating more and more things. You can start moving towards different types of metrics. But in the very, very beginning, truly understanding people and their pain and their problem, yeah, my personal advice is talk to them in person. Even if you have to go on a trip, and even if you're using funding at that point, for travel over code, it's a little bit controversial. And I'm not saying you should go like on a spending spree and travel around the world just for the sake of traveling around the world. But I've heard of a lot of startups, they travel around. I do this myself now, and I'll meet with entrepreneurs because I'm also not only a teacher, but I want to learn. I want to meet more entrepreneurs. I want to understand how I can help them better. The travel is fun, but nobody yells at anyone when they literally waste $1 million on code. So if you waste $10,000 on travel, again,
Yes.
These numbers are sort of just pulled out of thin air, but it's true. I'd rather see you travel somewhere, spend a month somewhere, talking to people, understanding really what's going on. Spend a week, 2 weeks on talking to people, human beings, understanding them, rather than just investing the same money on code, which is 100% speculative.
There is sorry, Adam, but there is another couple of questions now. Can you see them?
Yep. And again, I obviously enjoy this stuff. If something's not, and I want feedback too. If something's not clear, I know we have a little bit of time where we want a little bit of constraint, but afterwards, just send me emails or on the whatever, I'll answer everything. All right. Yeah, so the complete product, it's a great question. It's one of those catch-22s. There are times where the entrepreneur believes that the only thing.
Sorry, Adam. Adam, can you repeat the question by Dimitar?
So how do you build a new hypothesis if what you're building requires to have a complete product in order to test it? It's a great question. I don't want to diminish it in any way. It's usually not the case. People blame long sales cycles, or they have to see it before they try it. Usually the problem is that their problem isn't big enough, or it's not a big enough priority, or they're not really the ones making the decision, and they're just using it as an excuse, to kind of, okay, we're kind of interested. They're testing you to see if how you'll react. there are usually ways, and I would have to get the specific use case, but usually there's a way of, I don't want to say faking it, but you have to be just as bold as they are and say, nope, or a letter of intent works sometimes in this case where it's like, okay, if we actually build it, you at least agree to pay, a discounted price for it for the first year, or something here. There's something here. So it's called the high barrier test. So do something else rather than just have a meeting or a pitch deck. Make them do something that proves to you that it's reasonable that if you build it, they will come. So you want to run experiments, and it's called the high wall test, or the barbed wire test, or the high jump test. Instead of just like pitching them, you want to do something that's short of building the entire product, but still gives you a reasonable belief that, if they're really serious, that they will buy it at the end, because that's all you care about. The entrepreneur is gonna believe that they need to build the whole product, but it's very rarely the case. And there's no good answer. That's one of the hardest questions in Lean, and you have to take a leap of faith. You have to run an experiment yourself. You have to sort of see how comfortable you are pitching,
Sure.
Getting away from the pitch deck and towards a little bit of an MVP. And then maybe there's 1 in a million, 1 in 1,000 projects where you do have to build the whole thing. Yeah, it's a harder question, but there's usually ways, and there's usually, if you give the mentor or even me exactly what you're working on, we'll be able to figure out, okay, you don't need this to do this, or this can be done in a week this way, or this thing doesn't scale long term, but short term you can do it as a proof of concept, or as a prototype. I hate to use that word prototype because it gets confused with MVP, but yeah, there's usually a way to do it. It's just proof. You're doing this stuff in the beginning for learning and for proof and for evidence, not for like a long-term business viability. So if it's just one huge client and your whole entire startup depends on it, and that's the bet you're willing to make, and you say, okay, I'm giving myself 6 months and I'm going to build it, okay, then that's the bet, and that's your thesis. Usually it doesn't need to be that way. But if you're just convinced that that's the way, then some mentor will say, okay, we'll do it in 3 months and do it for half as much money, and but then you'll blame the experiment if it fails. If it succeeds, then there's no argument. And then if it fails, you can say, well, this is why. It either failed because it wasn't good enough, we didn't build enough, or maybe it's because we didn't understand our customer. 90% of the time, it's for a reason other than we didn't build enough. But it's for the entrepreneur has to be comfortable with that.
Another question by Igor.
Yeah, so that's
and Luigi.
It's a great question. It's pretty similar. So I think, hardware, obviously, you need, for retention, you need the product, obviously, for people to come back or for people to tell their friends. But even for hardware, a 3D printer, the unique value proposition has to be there. The problem, like, do you want to print stuff in your house? For early adopters. We're not talking about mainstream people here. Those people do need to touch the product. They need to try it out. They need to see it in Best Buy or whatever the European equivalent of Best Buy is. Mainstream people need to see the product, but we're not talking about that, and that's probably the one thing I left out. You're finding the first customer, the first 10 customers, the first 100 customers. These people do not, if the problem speaks to them, if the solution speaks to them, if it's clean, if you understand exactly, you're not just like randomly throwing different ideas up there, but you're saying, you need this 3D printer because you have a school project, and this is what it's going to do and when, even then you don't really need hardware for an MVP in those cases. You need it for retention. You need it for them to tell their friends, but sometimes you don't even need it for them to tell their friends. Like, oh, I know you have this problem. This thing looks like it's going to solve your problem. So here, look, go to this website. Yeah, the only time you really need it is for them to buy it a second time. you do need to deliver value at some point. Even then, you can hack it together. You know, again, back to 3D printers because it's sort of something I'm becoming a little bit more familiar with. I'm not a hardware expert, and I admit it. But you know, the open source people, you want people that are like overwhelming. You want to see overwhelming demand before you go invest in it. Even I have a friend who's working on, you know, lights, you know, and smart lighting. It should still, is it the problem of energy saving? Is it a problem of annoyance, you know, finding the light switch? Like, what is the actual problem that the hardware is meant to solve? Not just that it's cool or this is great technology, but you can still really use this to understand exactly who the customer is, exactly what problem the hardware is solving, and then you get into the solution, which is the hardware itself.
Yeah.
But if you understand the variables, you can still run tests, both with the customer development side, but also with you know, demand-based solution stuff, and before you build it. At some point, sure, there are gonna be things where you'll stump me and I'll find something that you just have to build. The only thing I've thought of, and this gets back to the woman in Kansas City I work with, there's a plant, you know, in a toy store, you know, that dances when it's solar powered, and that's something you need to see. You know, I can't even explain the example, but I'll send it around. It's like gimmicky stuff that you need to see in order to try, but that's mainstream. It's gimmicky stuff. For the most part, there's usually an experiment, even with hardware, where you can either understand the problem better through customer development or understand demand better through some sort of landing page or visual or crowdfunding. Even crowdfunding with hardware is a big thing now.
Adam,
that can exist.
I hate to interrupt, but we are getting close to the conclusion of our session. Before we complete, first of all, you mentioned crowdfunding. Can you reveal to us what's the content on your shirt?
Oh, that's funny. I get asked all the time. It was a Kickstarter T-shirt. Let me see.
We cannot see. Yeah, we don't see it all.
So.
Okay, that's nice. What was it?
I don't know. I got it in the mail. Asked me from around the world. I picked out my outfit. It's startup related, and I picked out my outfit this morning. But it's Kickstarter. I know enough that it's Kickstarter, but it was not my campaign. I think it was set up by Kickstarter themselves. There's a story I tell all the time. This is the first time I think it'll be recorded, but they kept asking me for my address, you know, but I felt guilty because I knew I hadn't contributed any money, so I didn't want to get a free T-shirt. And they kept sending me, what's your address and what's your size? What's your address? What's your size? So finally I said, fine, here's my size and my address. They sent me a free T-shirt for backing this campaign that I don't remember backing. But I don't feel bad, you know, with a free T-shirt anymore because I probably say Kickstarter 5,000 times a day when I wear this shirt.
Sure. So just to complete, first of all, as we could see, the Lean Startup methodology and this world is really, oh, that's a great movie. Thank you very much for this slide with Glenn Rose, Adam.
Yeah, where is it?
One of the slides is just, yeah, this one. Yeah, always be closing.
So yeah, so the reason, but the reason why, and it's important, I don't want to just jump into this slide, because in customer development, we actually don't want you selling. When you're talking about understanding the problems, entrepreneurs are very likely to just start selling the solution. So this slide is important, but only in context. When you're trying to understand the problem and the customer, we don't want you selling. When you've proven to yourself that you think you're now trying to test the solution, that's when you can test demand through selling and not just through like, oh, that's a good idea. So that slide is in the testing demand, not the not the customer development section.
I personally, I think the two words that I take from this important session are testing and demand. These are the two things which I'm going to that are very strong, and I'm going to take out of this. And I invite you, you know, I invite the ventures and the entrepreneurs really to see what are the 2 or 3 relevant topics that you can really take from this session and implement in your business straight away. Very much in line with the session that you had with Asaf Mendelssohn last week about the real definition, the definition of your whole product and the validation plan. So, and as we can see, Adam, perhaps there will be a chance to invite you again, perhaps to elaborate and really to take, to discuss more, because there are plenty of topics which are relevant in this. And I also take your invitation for the startups and the ventures here. If you have any direct question to Adam, Rashcho, which is our program coordinator, will put the email on the platform, Adam's email. So perhaps you could communicate with Adam on this one. So Adam, again, thank you very much. I know that you just landed a day ago, and you're really appreciated the fact that you joined us today. Thank you very much. I think this was very useful and just in the right timing as far as the program is concerned. As far as the following few days, as I mentioned earlier, this week we are talking to mentors. So you have a session tomorrow. Most of you already have it in the diary. Set with me, and another session with your one-on-one with your mentor for this stage. So please communicate with Rashcho and make sure that all is in the diary. We are stepping up a gear now, and we are moving forwards towards identifying your goals, identifying your real needs, and going forward in starting to execute one by one, using the resources that we have and the program. Okay. So this is in terms of this. As I mentioned earlier, you will have a chance next week to discuss and to communicate directly with UX and UI experts. Yes, user experience experts in terms of the design and the layout of your venture. So by all means, if you have anything to do with questions or any challenges to do with the user experience of your product, feel free to use it. Adam, by the way, we can still see your screen, so you can undo it if you wish. So that's so that's this one. So that's about it for today. If you have any questions or anything at all, please feel free to communicate with Rashcho or myself today, this evening. And I know that I'm going to see most of you tomorrow. So have a great evening. Adam, thanks again. Appreciate it. And we'll speak soon. Okay. So have a great evening, and bye for now.